It's called Hipster History. Today is the anniversary of something you probably have heard of by name, but have not heard of in terms of the details. On April 24th, 104 years ago, on the orders of military authorities, more than 250 prominent Armenian intellectuals and leaders were arrested, taken from the city and from Ankara to a prison in the interior of the country, and they were shot. The Armenian Genocide in the Ottoman Empire had begun. This would have an unfathomably lethal impact on 20th century Europe and continues to reverberate today. The word genocide had not yet been in common usage in April 1915, but the first of the century's episodes of mass murder motivated by racial or religious hatred was underway. The Armenians, who are Christians living in a Muslim-dominated Turkey, fit both categories, and when the bloodbath ended, the Turks had killed some 1.5 million Armenian men, women, and children. There was little in the way of armed resistance, and this was a grim irony. Most able-bodied men of an ethnic group accused of disloyalty were in uniform because they had served in the Ottoman Empire's armed forces at the outbreak of World War I. No genocide ever makes sense, but this one featured the perverse specter of Armenian soldiers being pulled out of the ranks and executed, or imprisoned in slave labor camps. While this was going on, their wives, sons, daughters, parents, and siblings were attacked by organized vigilante groups that raped women, kidnapped children, and randomly put citizens to the sword. Now, confronting the magnitude of the Nazi camps after World War II, Winston Churchill would later say that the world had been confronted by a crime that has no name, and it was Raphael Lemkin, who was a Polish Jew, who survived the war and provided the name. He coined the term genocide, and it was in time codified as an international crime against humanity. And as early as 1895, the New York Times employed a different word now associated with genocide. The headline read, "Another Armenian Holocaust," about a pogrom that occurred 20 years before 1915. In other words, the concept of ethnic cleansing wasn't unknown, but what happened in Turkey during the carnage of World War I was that the power of an entire nation was harnessed in such a case. It was the first, and it wouldn't be the last. This crime was covered extensively in the American press, denounced by American officials and diplomats as it was unfolding. Teddy Roosevelt called the slaughter of the Armenians the greatest crime of the war. These protestations had no effect on Turkey, which was not then an ally of the U.S. World opinion only counted for so much. On the eve of Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939, Hitler invoked the fate of Armenia to squash any claims his military might have had about the systematic war crimes the Third Reich was about to unleash on the Poles and the Jews wherever they found them. After all, Hitler said on August 22nd, 1939, who today speaks of the annihilation of the Armenians? The answer to that question, repeated through the decades in reply to shameful denials by the Turkish government, was this: Americans do. We remember the Armenians, but Turkey is a NATO country, and the last president to apply the word genocide to the Armenian Holocaust was Reagan. He did it only once before the State Department convinced him and every other subsequent president, including Trump, to avoid using the term. And on that note, that fun note, I'm reading a book right now by Walter Duranty, who was very notoriously the New York Times man who was covering the Soviet Union from within, from the rise of Lenin through Stalin's reign. And there's a biography of him I haven't read, but it's on my shelf, called Stalin's Apologist. And he had a huge role to play in covering up the genocide that Stalin unleashed on the Ukrainians, where a couple of million people were intentionally starved to death. Their homes were searched, and the people who were fat or who weren't starving were the ones you knew were hiding food. So those are the ones who had to get the most punishment. So this was an intentional genocide. And if you go to my Twitter, I have just all these quotes I'm pulling from his book where he says explicitly there's no famine, that this is all lies, that the kids are happier than anywhere in the world. They look fit and happy. And he at one point explicitly said there's no need for foreigners to go through these villages.